Hi everyone, thanks for attending and thanks for the interest in the topic. My name is Olaf Hannemann. I'm the co-founder of CVVC and I look after our investment business. A few words on CVVC. We are a venture capital investor with a focus on startups that build based on blockchain technology. So traditional early stage venture capital with our own incubation program and direct investments, both equity into companies, but also more recently into private token investments. CVVC and CV Labs, founded in 2017. We've invested in, I say 37, but we've done a few deals. We invested in 43 startups in the blockchain sector to date, from 20 different countries and 4 different continents. And we believe that venture capital of the future is more than just money. Working with our colleagues from CV Labs who run, not just the co-working space, but also our incubation program, events and education like today. So that's really a warm welcome into a very relevant topic, which you can see from the audience. Very much looking forward to both the expert presentations and the panel discussions. Just by way of further introduction, if you want to learn about our investment products, we have Sita Chopra here is our relationship manager on the investor side, and clearly also for startups, we can speak to any one of us about investment opportunities. Without further ado, back to Fabiola, CV Labs, and the program. Thanks for your interest.
Thank you. I oftentimes I get to ask this question, like, what is CVVC, what is CV Labs? And we are like sister companies, we were founded at the same time. But I always like Olaf to give the introduction, so like the VC to the blockchain related investments. And we are the community management side. So thanks to these synergies that we are able to have this co-working space, to do many activities, and to have events like this. So thank you very much to our initiators and founders for all these ideas. Today, we are really glad to have you here because it's kind of coming back event. We are positively surprised about the audience. Thank you very much for joining. So, as you know, the topic is on DAOs, is the future of work and the implications for the DAO members. So we have a really rich setup of speakers and a panel discussion. So we will start right away. We have here, let me play with the clicker. This is really special because on this occasion, I will go through the agenda really fast. So we will have 3 presentations. One is from Multilateral Group. They are going to give us a really nice introduction on the topic of the DAOs. Then WakaPay is a DAO candidate. They have a really interesting project. And actually, they have a really interesting solution for enterprise. And it's quite close to a classic DAO. So Nikolai will develop and he will show us how the product works. And after this, we have the panel of discussion. 2 of our panelists are here on site, and the other 2 are decentralized, are online. One person is in Spain right now, and the other one is joining us from Australia. So we should appreciate a lot that it's around 3 in the morning around there, and then he's willing to talk to us. Okay. So without further ado, I will pass the word to Lenaarts, and he will start developing on the topic of DAOs.
Good evening, everyone. The future of work with DAOs. I've been talking to quite a few of the crowd here earlier. There is a lot of heavy technical people in the room. There are corporates in the room. And there are a lot of projects that are interested in exploring what a DAO can mean for them. And Multilateral Group works with a lot of the technical experts who suddenly find that they need to understand what tokens are in terms of legal outcomes. We work a lot with lawyers. I have been in Australia a lot, and I do a lot of early stage seed and angel with the early stage technologists to look at how they actually go to market. So DAOs are a huge topic right now. DAOs, we believe, will be one of the fundamental governance structures for the metaverse. So that's going to be a big industry in and of itself. And we see video games as one of the profound use cases for DAOs. And I've been talking to a lot of people who are coding and who are involved in the video game industry, who are moonlighting, who want to not do their corporate job anymore. So the great resignation because of COVID, a lot of us have had to, well, the world's changed. I think that's pretty obvious. So a lot of people are thinking about how else can I work. And the interesting thing with DAOs is traditionally a DAO is an on-chain organisation. It has a wallet and people vote on how the money is allocated. That's a very traditional way of looking at DAOs. But we're starting to understand that there is not one size fits all model for DAOs. There's a lot of variety and there's a lot of different ambitions inside the entrepreneurs of the way that they think about how they want to use the idea of a DAO. But what we've noticed is traditional organisations like corporates are very interested in DAOs, but how do they interact with something that cannot do traditional legal contracts with them, that don't necessarily have a company next to them? So the on-chain, off-chain world is a bit of a translation issue. So we developed what we called the 5 schools of thought. Traditionally, the protocol there runs. Everybody's very familiar with these kinds of DAOs. Effectively, they want to be on-chain only. They're not interested in government regulation. They're highly innovative. A lot of them are very anti-government on one level. Let's just call it what it is. So they're not the only kinds of DAOs. And what we're starting to see now is the best practice that we're working in is to look at working with government rather than against or outside of government regulation. So we spent some time talking to the UK, to the Australian government, and I'll be spending a lot of time here working with legal firms and talking to the government about DAOs. What's at stake? There's going to be a lot of the economy in DAOs. It's an alternate legal structure, so it will be an alternate to corporate structures long term. It's a brand new idea. It's been a long time since we've seen a really big idea like this for human organisational structures. So what does that mean? There'll be different kinds of DAOs here. I'll just quickly go through this because I don't want to take too long on this, and we can come back to any questions about this on the panel. We see the best practice DAOs will have a relationship with government. These people will not have a relationship with government. I like a lot of the entrepreneurs here. Very, very strong-willed people. They tend to be a very heroic character. They tend to have an idea to build a new world system. I really like these guys, and I really like those kinds of projects. But the reality is, with the change of use of funds around cryptocurrencies, the need for KYC, for AML, those sorts of things, there has to be a set of systems and a set of partnerships around traditional DAOs to actually help them integrate into the financial system. So that's what we're doing here. The third kind of DAO we can see is AIs. So DAOs that use AIs, DAOs that own AIs. That's going to be fascinating. I actually met a couple of people in the room here who are looking at AI-driven solutions around blockchains, and that will be a fundamental category of DAOs. What gets really interesting is if a DAO is owned by an AI, what are we going to do about the governance? So Yeah, that's singularity territory. So it's very important to put humans in the loop in these early stages and get our policies and governance correct about those things especially. So a lot of AI safety considerations there. But we're now talking, in the old world, that would be like a corporation that's run by an AI. That's going to happen with DAOs. So what we need to do is think very carefully now about policy settings. And the regulators have a difficult time because they can't keep up with the innovation and the nerds. And the nerds talk a different language. So I find myself translating between a lot of heavily technical people and talking and translating to business-minded, government-minded people. The fourth one is very interesting. Disaffected people, voices for inequality, protest people. Examples of these kinds of DAOs are media DAOs that don't want to be censored, alternates to Twitter, those sorts of things. So community-run, community-owned platforms that are making a freedom of voice or an idea against some sort of thing in the world. So they're an away from motivated group. So they want something to change in the world and they tend to be protest and they tend to be pirate-like people and they're anti. And then we've got our extremely positive people down the end there, the idealists, the utopian people. And they are looking not at a token that is going to go up in price, but they are thinking about what positive change do they want to see in the world. They're not necessarily money-driven. They might be philosophically driven. They might want something to happen with the data economy. So they're a very different class of structure. So we expect different kinds of organisational structures inside these different mindsets. Now, this is the Swiss Federal Council's view of the future of Switzerland in terms of the digital economy. But there has been a bit of an oversight around, we believe, multilateral believes that 6, 7, 9, where the green dots are, DAOs could have a significant impact. So a lot of business could move to Switzerland if, and the big idea is if there is a tax settlement system for DAOs with the Swiss jurisdiction, there's an opportunity to compete with Singapore or London or Wisconsin, and that's going to be a very interesting, because there's a lot of money on the table. And I think a lot of people in the room understand the amount of money that is involved in DAOs, and it's only going to grow. So what is taxation? So I'll probably leave that as an open question for the panel later on, and how that plays out. So in terms of data use, shared data, digital identity, I think it's going to be one of the prime problems that DAOs are going to address. And we have to deal with KYC, AML, CTF and all those things. But anonymous or pseudonymous and paying tax, these are highly contested arguments. So each one of those philosophical frameworks will have a different set of answers, and I think that's the opportunity for democracy, and I think that's the opportunity for new human organisations. So I know the world's changed a lot lately, but I think that DAOs can be part of the new governance layer of the planet. So that's why I'm optimistic ultimately about this as an experiment. But this time, I don't want it to look like social media, right? So we don't want DAOs to be polarised, argumentative, closed. They've got to be high-level communication systems, so they're collective intelligence organisations. So that's what I'm helping the technologists get their head around. But human nature is human nature, so I think there's going to be a need for a lot of psychology, a lot of many different kinds of professionals to assist the communication in DAOs. So I think that's, I'll just leave it there. So that's what multilaterals having a look at, and that's what we're doing. So thank you.
Thank you, Grant, for this. Now we will pass to our next speaker, George, please. So, I have to take myself.
Hi everyone, my name is George from Wakabe. So to understand WakaPay, I would like you to think, how would have been your experience with crypto and digital assets if you wouldn't have a bank account? And this is a huge problem for 98% of African people because they don't have a bank account. So WakaPay is a digital agent for digital wallets. What we do is we are helping our client to pass from cash to digital assets and from digital asset to cash. So any African now has possibility to store their money in a digital wallet, and when they need to cash out, they can just go to WakaPay and find an agent where they can have cash. So you can do this through physical agents or through direct people. Everyone can be an agent on WakaPay mobile app, and also through bank and ATM machine. So this is very powerful if you try to think, because now one of the biggest issues that we have in Africa is money, especially currency. Most of our currency, they are having very high inflation. And I can just say an example. I visited Zimbabwe 4 years ago, and at the moment I took out my money from my card and had cash, I lost almost 35%. And so this is the reality in Africa. And they are trying to say, yeah, we have this currency which is related to dollar, but it's not, because if you are having dollar, everyone is ready to give you 10 of their local currency for $1. And so crypto is representing a huge opportunity because it's allowing all Africans to store their money in a digital wallet, and WakaPay is giving them the possibility to cash out, because we are talking here of the cash economies where cash is still the king. So, because today we are talking about DAO, I would like to give you an example of how we have similar type of organization like DAO that are working in Africa but completely offline. So this is typical villages who are coming together, sometimes also 20 villages who are coming together and creating a juridical entity where every village is like a shareholder. And they do this with the goal to run an asset, like hydro power plant, like that one in the picture. So, and they're making money by selling tokens, energy tokens, completely offline. So when you buy through mobile money, you are receiving an SMS with a number, normally a 12 number, which is a token actually contain all your personal information, the amount that you paid, and also the amount of the power that you can use with that token. So you can take that token, hold, and sell to someone else, or you can use that token to put on your meter at home and to have electricity. So it's quite very interesting, and here is where the idea with talking with the grant, because if you try to think, now these small remote villages, they are working this way completely offline. But try to think if you can connect them and give them the possibility to reach the international audience and also crypto community where they can directly give money to this organization to fund their project. Isn't this interesting? I mean, if you're thinking we are putting a lot of money in Africa, but most of the time this money are going to the pockets of politicians. Here now, blockchain is giving us the possibility to give money directly to people who might need. And these are the projects where I think we bring a huge impact to the real life of the people. And this is the very interesting thing about blockchain in Africa, because here, maybe you guys are using for video games and etc. But in Africa, blockchain is used for real problem, to solve real problem. Digital identities, digital wallet, possibility to get directly money from international audience, and so on and so on. So this is why it's coming the idea now, and where I talked with Grant to see how together we can paint this in reality. Thank you very much.
Thank you, also. Thanks for having me here. I will briefly lead you through what Actionariat does. Sorry for the colors of the presentation, by the way, they're a bit off, so it wasn't meant to be like that, but I think it's still readable, hopefully. Yeah, not so much. Okay, so what we are up to is we want to democratize venture capital or private equity in general. So what is the problem today with venture capital? Yeah, that's the problem, right? No, the problem is that it's very exclusive. So only a few people have access to these highly interesting investment opportunities. And also, if you're in, it's highly illiquid. So you usually stop with the investment for 10 or 15 years even. And then the other problem is it's very hard to price. So every time you do a financing round, it's a negotiation with VCs or investors in general, because you don't have a clear price for the asset. So our vision of open equity wants to solve all of these three problems. First of all, making it more accessible, so everyone can invest in private companies. As you may know, only about 1% of the AGs in Switzerland are listed on the stock exchange and everyone can invest in them. So we make every private company in Switzerland accessible, hopefully, somewhere. And we not only make it accessible, we also make it liquid, so we create liquid markets. And if you have a liquid market for an asset, then yes, of course, you also have a reliable price. So we can solve all of the three problems of venture capital or private equity that we have today. So you can use our tools not only as a company to do fundraising, you can do it to do a continuous fundraising, so you don't have to go through financing rounds, but you can do a more continuous way of fundraising. You can use it for stakeholder engagement, so you can offer your clients, your suppliers to buy shares of your company. You can also use it to facilitate employee participation by giving out real shares with a real market value, so your employees also know what the shares are worth, and they're not only phantom stocks that basically do not have a value until you realize the exit. And then also for founders, it's a possibility to incrementally earn out. That's what we call strategic independence. So you can incrementally sell batches of your shares to the public and earn out on your investment. So enough of the talk. Let's see how this works. And therefore, I will do a quick live demo and buy a share of Actionariat. So maybe let's start here and go to our homepage of our website, where you can find a list of companies that you can invest in. And you can have a look at all the companies that are investable right now. There are many more to come, by the way. And I see here Actionariat, again, this looks very interesting. So let me see if I can invest in this company here. So what you can see here is the so-called broker bot. Broker bot is an automated market maker which allows you to buy shares but also sell shares. So what I'm going to do right now is I buy a share of Actionariat, and to do so I need to connect the wallet. And of course this Actionariat app here looks very interesting, so I'll use that one. So what I do now is I scan the QR code with my wallet. Next, I choose how many shares I want to buy. Obviously, I don't have enough Ether to buy 1,000 shares, so I'm trying one. Choose the means of payment, so I could even buy the shares with a bank transfer. But I'm going to go with Ether, because hopefully I have enough Ether on the wallet. I click understand the terms. Yes, that's true, that's true. but we have a solution for that. So. Okay, so my wallet said the transaction is true, so now it's on the Ethereum network to approve the transaction, and in the meantime it will be spinning a bit. And yes, very true, so the transaction costs fluctuate and can be very high, can be 100 Swiss francs even for a simple transaction. That's why since a couple of weeks we also offer the possibility to deploy the smart contracts on layer 2 optimism, where you pay a franc, about a franc up to 5 francs for a transaction, which makes a lot more sense if you want to buy only one share, as I just did, as you have seen, I just bought a share of Oxygen. Thank you so much.
Yeah, hi, my name is Michael Kunz. I work at MME. I'm a senior associate. I've been working there for 5 years and spent most of my time working for and with blockchain.
Excellent. Andrew?
Yep, hi, Andrew Walton. I'm calling in from Australia. I'm a co-founder of Multilateral Group with Grant, and I look after the general management of the business.
Alan?
Hi, calling in from Spain, from the Alain Summit. I work in GSR, the oldest and largest liquidity provider for digital assets, and have been involved in the crypto space for several years in different functions.
Excellent. So we will start with the questions. And when here we are in the blockchain space, everybody is super familiar with decentralization, and most of you are familiar with DAOs or know some DAOs already. So it is a really interesting way to work with people around the world in a way where it is effective, is safe, and it looks quite practical. But Alan, can you tell us from your perspective, what are some of the biggest advantages you see in companies that organize in a DAO structure?
I mean, thank you for the question. I probably would reframe the question a bit, because when we think about what an organization is, it's basically just a human construct with the aim to coordinate human capital, so DB. So I think the biggest potential I see, or we see with DAOs, is for humans themselves. And it's not really a question about the future, because I think the future is already here. It's a bit unevenly distributed to steal the old core. But I think the biggest advantage we see is basically shifting like the value captured from work, from a corporation, which is basically soulless, to more like back to the humans. Then it's the same thing when we talk about a lot of bias at workplace. I mean, we're all humans, so we are like victims to our own bias. We can try to solve them in different ways, but I just think when you work for DAOs, or you think about DAOs, it will be like everybody in the future will work for it, and the main reason will be because it's based on competition. It's the only criterion that is, let's say, determining if you get to work as a DAO or not, is if you actually if you can do the job, or if you cannot do it. So I see like the biggest potential to make it a fairer world.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much, Alan. So a lot of the things or the main aspects people like about DAOs is like they are quite anonymous, they are centralized, and pretty much everybody has the impression that everything can keep, let's say, online. But Michael, I have a question for you. Is there an off-chain reality for DAOs? And what are the most common problems that you see operationally in the real world for your clients?
Thank you. So yeah, I would say there is an off-chain reality for DAOs, but we have to distinguish between the types of DAOs that we look at. So, for example, look at social DAOs that really are just memeing around, they are contributing, they're creating content. I think for those it's not as important as for protocol DAOs that are developing a decentralized finance protocol that really also has regulatory consequences. And the main issue that we do see is that DAOs are a lot of things, but they're not legal entities. And so one of the main advantages of legal entities is that they shield members and contributors from personal liability. So a DAO does not do that. And as a consequence, a lot of people are surprised when they hear that by contributing and participating in a DAO and being active, that they actually expose themselves to liability from the DAO, but also from a regulatory perspective. So if you are in the DAO, theoretically you are a member of a general partnership, and as such you are liable for all the obligations of the DAO towards the outside, but you're also liable, at least potentially, for regulatory transgressions. So especially when you talk about protocol DAOs, we understand that a lot of these protocols do fantastic things, but it's not always very clear whether what you're doing is legal, right? Whether they're compliant. And so a lot of these projects actually want to have a legal wrapper that protects the individual members and also the founders from personal liability. And I think because we have this relationship between DAOs and a legal entity that is allowing, for that shield, and that allows for them to have a legal address, and allows them to own intellectual property rights and such, we have to think about what is the relationship between the DAO on the one hand and on the legal relationship, the legal entity on the other hand. And so when we look at this problem, we see different approaches. So we have clients that come that have a product that is already working and they want to DAOize now. They say, look, we want to participate in this Web3 space. We want to actually have our users to be the owners of the protocol. We want either to issue a new token or use the old token and add governance rights to it. There we see a big issue that a lot of these projects don't really want to give away power, right? So they do say, yes, we want to have these people contribute and feel as owners, but when it comes to really letting it go, letting the project go, they're not feeling as comfortable anymore. And there is reason. So first of all, they do it because they say, well, we are the founders, we know what's best for the project, and we kind of see where it's heading. But it also has to do with the fact that they say, look, sometimes we have a lot of assets locked that are in our protocols, and what if something goes wrong? Because what is SEC and FINMA, they're not going to look at and say, oh, it's a DAO, nobody's responsible. They say, well, you guys founded it, you kind of set it up, and in the end, you need to have a figurehead that remains responsible. But then we also have the other side, where people that are DAOs come to us and say, look, we want to have our legal entity. And that kind of shields us. Then again, there's others that say we want to do both at the same time, which is very complicated. Because usually when you ask them, what should the relationship look like, they're really, really unsure. And that has a lot to do with the fact that DAOs have on-chain governance, and so we always talk about, most people think DAOs are governance tools and they decide and they execute, but that's usually not the case. So most DAOs that I see they're to a certain extent decentralized, but it's usually just a decision-making process. So let's assume you have a very wide distribution of token, and you can actually say you are distributed. You have 1,000 participants. What happens if the DAO says, yes, we want to do this thing? Somebody has to execute that. And so when we talk about regulatory responsibility, it has a lot of consequences that the DAO says, because you cannot say the DAO forced me to do this, the DAO told me to do that. At the end of the day, you're the one that actually signs the transaction on chain. So I would say these are some of the questions that we are dealing with, and there is definitely an on-chain reality.
Excellent, thank you very much, Michael. Alain, I have a question. You are in the market-making business, and we often hear that there are as well some challenges for DAOs in your business. Can you share a little bit your experience of what can be the challenge that a DAO organization face with market-making?
Yes, I think there are two main categories of challenge. One is already touched by Michael. It's because we a centralized entity, and we interact with DAOs. There are a lot of questions about the legal structure behind it, who is actually our contractual counterparty. I just think, I'm very hopeful, that's just a matter of time that gets sorted out, and DAOs will have some legal structure. The other more interesting thing is basically all the negotiation we are doing, if we pitch for market making for a token of a DAO, is very publicly, and you have basically the whole community, you need to engage it in a very public way. And Google, we have been involved in a few of that, competitive, so that's so funny too, because everything is very transparent. And the other side is what we also see as a big challenge as a market maker, it's the governance itself. I mean, it sounds very good, everybody can vote, but like participation rate can be very low. You can have like primaries happening. And another challenge that's also we see a lot of DAOs are facing is basically they lack basic tools every organization has. Like, I mean, how do you, if you have people working on a DAO, how are you going to deal with all the HR like stuff? How are you going to actually deal with auditing and reporting all the assets of the DAO? So that's like the biggest challenge. Like all the basic tools we think they are like normal that every organization has, like lawyers, auditors, reporters, and all that stuff. That's what really lacking. But I think for us the biggest challenge is like legally. Who are we drafting it? And the other thing is like actually doing the negotiation because it's completely public, which has some disadvantage.
Okay, thank you very much, Alain. And now I want to grant and Andrew. Well, we have heard all of the challenge that have been described. So does a DAO needs to have a jurisdiction?
Andrew?
Yeah, I'll take that one. So currently, DAOs don't have a jurisdiction, and that is both a positive, but it's also a negative to the points that Michael was talking about earlier. If you don't have jurisdiction, how do you tie down legal responsibility? How do regulators interact? How do taxation laws work? How do people transact? And when, to Alain's point, if you're looking at having a transparent system of working with companies that do work within jurisdiction, then how do they contract with the DAO? So our view is that as much as presently DAOs do not have legal personhood, so don't fit in any particular jurisdiction, we see a great opportunity for jurisdictions such as Switzerland, and it is happening in a couple of other places as well, where regulators are looking at how are they going to deal with DAOs, how are they going to recognise DAOs, and our journey started down in Australia where the upper house system of government did make a recommendation last year to register DAOs, to recognise DAOs, but their approach is a new form of company, and for all the reasons we've just talked about in the presentation so far, a DAO is not really a company, it's a new form of organisation, and so it needs a much broader thinking in terms of, as Grant explained, some of the different schools of thought there. How do they react and how do they relate in a world where there are a whole lot of things that are happening off-chain as well as things happening on-chain? So our contention would be that there should be a jurisdiction, and the challenge is how to take that jurisdiction and build into it as many of the unknowns that can be done, so that there's flexibility going forward and legal personhood as a concept can be addressed. And we're starting with a functional and regulatory equivalence approach to that, so that how we build things can be retrofitted to what will ultimately become a legislation in various jurisdictions around the world.
Excellent, Andrew. Thank you very much. In general, everybody all the time asks questions about how is it working with holding assets, managing in a DAO. Does anybody want to develop a little bit about this?
And Michael can correct me. In terms of taxes that pass through, so we're all responsible for our own tax. That's the first thing to understand. But the Treasury itself that's holding the assets, it becomes a very interesting problem if there is profit and if there's a distribution to all the members. Is that a profit that the DAO should pay? Do individuals have forward-thinking regulators, if there is a shielding entity, how does it deal with the disposal of profits? So it gets really interesting at that level, and I don't think it's solved that at all.
No, I would agree with that. Also, as I mentioned before, it depends who actually owns the treasury. So for the DAO members, they often think, we have a DAO, the DAO owns the treasury. But since the DAO doesn't really have legal person, but they cannot own assets, they cannot own, all the funds in the treasury cannot own intellectual property rights and such, right? And as a consequence, you really have to think about who is the actual owner, who puts it on the balance sheet. So especially if you don't have a legal entity, just don't do it. But if you have a legal entity, these questions pop up. And one advantage that you do see of having a legal wrapper for a DAO is that they're service providers. So oftentimes in protocol DAOs, they actually have to engage people because not everything is happening on chain. Somebody has to develop the tools, write the code, and these people want to be paid. And if these people are not just freelancers, contributors that do it at small scale, but actually bigger companies, they often ask us, how do we do it with VAT, right? Because we have to charge VAT. How do we do that? Because if you don't have a registered entity, we cannot send an invoice to a DAO. We have to send an invoice somewhere else. And so I would agree there are a lot of unanswered questions, and again, it really depends how we set it up. And so, it's one reason to get it right from the get-go when you actually want to do that.
Excellent. So I think there's a lot of questions for Michael in this regard. So how do you send an invoice to a DAO? That's a good question. Okay, Grant. We always hear about DAOs obviously in our ecosystem in blockchain. This is, we are quite familiar with it and the type of organization. But in your presentation, you were developing a lot about the interactions between companies, with multinationals and DAOs, and the interactions of the DAOs with governments. And why is this relevant and how this can be addressed? For example, how can I make a contract if I am a multinational company? How can I with whom I sign a contract if I want to, if you are a DAO?
Well, interestingly, Actionaria solves that if you have a security token that has an equity element, and you have a utility token that's for the protocol, and then the governance token for a DAO. Now, that's a long and complicated journey and very expensive if you're going to talk to these guys as you go through it. So there are different pathways that people choose. If the corporate wants to deal with a DAO, we think the opportunity space is ESG, environmental social governance. So in terms of stakeholders, if you put a DAO next to a corporation, the DAO can represent the interests of the customers, the suppliers, the supply chain, and other interested parties. A corporation has a social license to operate, but it has a fiduciary duty to maximise the almighty dollar. But the obligations can be transferred from a corporation to a DAO. So what gets really interesting is there could be two treasuries next to each other. In terms of net zero and our carbon footprints, all companies have a problem. They have to offset themselves by 2050, they have to get to neutrality. One way or another, we're all going to go through this journey. It's super hard. What if you could transfer an obligation to a DAO as a company for your net zero footprint and then lend money to a DAO? That's going to require a legal entity next to it. In the short term, it's going to look like a company structure that holds equity and a DAO next to it. And what I've seen is people transfer tokens to that company. So they effectively use the company as a holder of the assets. That might not be tax efficient. It might have capital gains problems, but that seems to be how it's playing out at the moment. So corporations could take that approach. But I think the real answer is we need something new for stakeholder organisations that aren't driven just by fiduciary or financial levers, but actually governance and purpose-driven ethics. So in some senses, DAOs could be the conscience for corporations.
Thank you. And then one more question, and this is for Andrew. Andrew, how do you plan to match the functional and the regulatory equivalence in a DAO?
Sure. Well, I think we've talked a little bit about that already, so much as there is this need, this transactional need for the outside world to be able to transact with the DAO. We see that being breached. So certainly the model that we're building has a bridge in it where there is, we'll call it a coordinator or an administrative function that is responsible to the DAO, the centralised element of the DAO, if you like, and that is the contracting entity with third parties, outside parties, but it also has a bridge relationship with the members of the DAO. And so taking those people that contribute at whatever layer they do and whatever discipline they bring into the DAO and classifying and putting that into member classes with rights and obligations and voting rights and the like, and building in accountability scopes around the centralised element of that creates the administration layer, if you like, where there is accountability that sits centralised within this administrative coordination function. But there's also the members of the DAO have votes in the areas that their membership classification would entitle them to do, and so it gets around some of the problems that Alain was talking about, where if everybody has a vote on everything, you will end up in a situation of chaos and no constructive way of working through problems and issues. By doing it the way we're looking at, we're starting to stratify it and giving people the democratic rights that relate to their membership, but decisions are more funneled and controlled way, if you like, and that is the way that we're working on building this bridge of accountability, if you like.
Excellent, Andrew. Thank you very much. Right now, I would like to pass the microphone to the audience, and then so you can place your questions.
I have a question. Since the DAO is not a legal entity, they have identifiers, company registration number, legal name. How do you identify a DAO that this is the same DAO I dealt before? How do you, let's say, uniquely identify so that you can actually tell somebody that that person deals exactly with the same DAO that you dealt with? What is the unique identifier that is commonly applicable for DAOs?
That's a good question. I would say one identifier that you have is on-chain. So you have the on-chain reality of most DAOs. So you do have the voting contracts, you do have and everybody that is associated with the DAO, so people who vote on it, people who set it up. This is everything, you cannot change it. Once it's on-chain, it's there. But obviously you don't have a registry, right? I mean, I guess that's the point of the blockchain, that you actually have this database that actually, you cannot simply change it. Once there, it's there. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but I think it's not easy to actually just defraud, basically come up as a second DAO, which is like, a fake DAO. It will work, right? People will find that out very easily.
So the token and the wallet is another way of looking at it, right? So, and because blockchains are a complete record, you can see where the tokens have travelled, and you can see which wallets they've gone to. So the address of the wallet is the owner of the token.
So the address identifies the DAO.
Correct. And there are plenty of projects, as you know, big data projects that are matching social identifiers and telegrams or discords to wallet addresses, people's public addresses like their email. And so if you're putting up your public address to have people send things to you in a social media environment, that's effectively identifying who you are. So it's a lot easier than people think to work out who wallet holders actually are. So every time you want to receive money, you're handing out your address. Who did you give it to? So it's the opposite of a credit card in that sense, but it acts like an email address as a pseudonymous identifier.
So somebody else has a question?
Hello. So you legally recommend me to start an anonymous DAO because obviously our next DAO is not a good idea, right? So it seems like anonymous DAOs so far they're working out well. They don't need a legal entity. So that's the way to go, I guess.
You, sir, are a type 1 DAO. So, yeah, he will definitely build anonymous and pseudonymous systems. And I think it has a place. I think governments need to be challenged around the fact that they do own all our identities and the identity paper systems that are behind our identity. And there seems to be an implied right, definitely in Australia I've had these arguments with the ATO privately, our taxation department. They believe they own our data. They really do. They believe they own all of our data. And government departments believe that. There has to be a paradigm shift around transferring ownership of data back to the citizen. Now, in an AI reality many years out, we are going to need pseudonymous identity systems with ZKP to protect our own vaults. We need privacy. There is ways to do this technically, you know that, Ali. So I think it's simplistic to say that everybody has to use their true identity. I think what we need is to get governments' head around that people can be third-party verified as a human, third-party verified that they have paid tax with no details going to the government. Now try getting your head around that if you're a government or a bureaucrat that don't like it. And that's what I spend my time doing, is having those arguments in private.
Maybe just to add, what I heard from clients is that the main issue with starting a completely anonymous DAO is that, or a completely anonymous DeFi protocol, is that you don't have the fame in order to build on because people need to trust you. So a lot of these things are based on trust. Right? If you just like a newcomer and you have an address, you don't have any history, and you say like there's my project. If you manage to become very successful, that's fantastic. But from what I've heard, it's very difficult because it has a lot to do with trust. So, in a way it's weird because it's a trustless system, but it requires trust at the end of the day, especially if you want to put your funds in a new DeFi protocol. I would never want to be the first user to try it.
Any more questions? Yes, please. No, okay, I missed that part. Yes, please.
Hi, thank you so much for the information tonight. So I'm Yasi from CEO of a market agency for tech startup, blockchain tech. And recently, especially in the past few weeks, I've been receiving 8 to 9 calls every single day from NFT projects. And the common pattern I've seen is that all of NFT projects, they have a DAO, they have a treasury, and then they plan to buy a land in Decentraland. And earlier you mentioned that all these DAOs, they are not a legal entity, so they do not really have the right to own anything. So what would you advise, like how can those projects still carry forward, but doing things the right way?
Well, I mean, ownership is a complicated thing in the end of the day, right? It depends to whom you want to prove that you own something, right? I mean, some things on chain, obviously you can own coins, because just having access and control over it is enough. If you own land, Decentraland, that's fine, right? Because your address, you control the address, and your address is, linked to that piece of land. That is great. But what does not work so easily is to own intellectual property, for example. There is, and you could argue that most projects are open source and everything anyways, including the public domain, so there's not really a lot of that left. But you can also think about trademarks. Maybe you have patents and other things that, depending on what type of DAO you're looking at. So like the decentralized science community, they are really working on creating new patents. So they have to figure out how we can make sure that our DAO actually owns these things. And I think it's a really good question because a lot of, DAO come up often in the same wording as Web3. And Web3 as a concept, you all have heard that. Web 1 is read, Web 2 is read and write, Web 3 is read, write, and own. And so the idea that you actually own it or are a co-owner of all this project is great, but some people in the DAO, they don't own the treasury, they don't own the IP in it. So I think it also has, there needs a lot of education needs to be done for people to understand that just because you participate in a DAO, you don't have any rights to anything unless it's specifically promised. And who can make that promise, right? Can another DAO member make that promise? No. So that's why a lot of DAOs actually come up with this legal wrapper idea for many different reasons. Actually, to make sure that ownership is clear, that you have, like in the real world, you can also manage ownership, it makes things much easier.
Perfect. One more question. Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Paulina. I work for Oxford Business Group. It's a global research and advisory company, and we have countries, more than 40 markets. So very often we always work with the government and also with the private sector. And very often we face a problem that, Grant, I think you mentioned in your presentation, right? We don't want to create polarity between the interests of the two parties when it comes to DAOs and the government. And you mentioned that the way to fight it is actually communication. Now, I have a very practical question. How do you do that? I mean, obviously we all understand communication is the key to avoid conflicts and to eliminate silos, right, in communication, but how do you do this in everyday life? And what are the ways that we can accelerate that? Thank you.
Beautiful question. Dialogue, not debate, is a very simple way of looking at it. Dialogue, not debate. Debate sets up a zero-sum game. Social media has proved that we're all triggerable and manipulated at length. Me too, I'm a YouTuber. So, dialogue, because there has to be a greater form of conversation. That's going to need some very skilled facilitators. Those are good old-fashioned soft skills, right? No smart contractor is going to improve people's dialogue skills. So the opportunity, again, I think is in interfaces to DAOs that allow conversational architectures that tend towards a dialogue or a purpose-driven conversation. So conversation dialogue. It's such a deep question. I think on a collective intelligence level, the information ecology has been ruined. Not just democracy, but the information ecology has been ruined by incorrect incentives. So the incentive for me to have integrity or to have authenticity or to tell the truth is incredibly difficult if we all have private balance sheets. What the real opportunity is a collective balance sheet system underneath DAOs, counterposed with each one of us have our own wallets, which is a private balance sheet. So so it's a game theoretic environment of incentives. That's the truth, and that's very difficult to elevate the incentive landscape of those architectures. So I think it's going to be very much like very good systems like Quora, where reputation matters, where the history of your commentary, the regard of others. So interestingly, something like, in terms of Reddit, there was Reddit Gold. So there was an incentivized structure where people would gift other people money for clever, smart, or funny things. We need something like that. That's a social currency, but also an ecological signaling system for when we find each other doing good things. How do we dob each other in for being awesome?
Excellent. Okay, I think we will close here the panel. Like our panelists are here available as well. There is somebody here from GSR in the room. If it's present, please raise your hand. No. Okay, well,
Otherwise, I can, if you are interested in talking to GSR, I can share the contact from Alain. We have friends from multilateral group here. MME is here, so if you have more questions, you can always come and answer directly. I will conclude. Thank you, Andrew and Alain, for joining us today, especially Andrew for being so far away. Please, applause. They make a lot to be joining us. Okay, so to conclude this, I want to mention something. Our friends from multilateral group were really generous because they, as I mentioned already, they are from Australia. They have been working in the topic of DAOs for quite a few years, doing a lot of research, and there is a report especially focusing on Switzerland. You can have here all the information regarding the digital finance areas of action and how DAOs can be applicable to it. So if you're interested, please, you can just go to the webpage, register, and you will get a full report. It's really impressive. I already read it, and I was positive surprised. It's really, really good. Okay. I'm serious. I learned a lot. It's really good. Okay, so can we move? I will pass the because like in CV Labs, many people ask us about what is next, what are we doing next. So our next event is online. It's about we are going to publish a global report. It's a report with global players, and we will have big companies developing about relevant topics, crisis and how crisis affect our space. So you can see on the 14th of April at 5 p.m. and this event is going to be purely online. And then, well, we are here for you guys. If you need any information regarding all the activities we do here at CB Labs, you are always more than welcome to ask us. Right now, please go have some drinks, network, and we wish to see you pretty soon in our next event. Thank you.